It's Nintendo time. Did you guys know that once upon a time, people were able to get their hands on consoles early because that's what happens when you launch a product worldwide that's selling over millions of units? Whether it's gaming consoles, video games, phones, or any other type of computer hardware. As soon as they leave the warehouse, they make it to the storage rooms and all of the various retail stores, and usually that means somebody can get their hands on it early. Because the people that work at those stores are humans, and they have friends that are also humans, and sometimes humans share things or sell things and break street dates. I don't know. Or sometimes things get shipped and sold to various parts of the world where people think that the whole idea of breaking a street date is dumb. Where they just receive a product and they're like, yeah, release date is in 2 days from now, but we got it early. We're just gonna sell it to you now. What's the big deal? So I'm just not sure how familiar you guys are with this concept, because I'm under the impression that a company like Nintendo would know this was a thing. And if they're so out of touch, maybe the whole world is out of touch. Okay, I'm gonna stop the sarcasm now. So people have naturally gotten their hands on the Nintendo Switch 2 early. It's to be expected. Well, I think for most people, it's to be expected. Now, there's a whole thing where it's like, if you put a Switch 2 game into the console, it'll work, but if you put a Switch 1 game, it needs an update. I don't care about that stuff. I've kind of already accepted that every single console is just a brick by the end of its lifespan, and the homebrew community is the only thing that's going to keep it alive. So basically, if you buy a Switch 2 in 10-15 years from now and they've moved on to the Switch 3, hopefully by that point there are tutorials about how to unbrick your Nintendo Switch 2 so that you can install homebrew on it and use it as intended. So even if Nintendo 100% required internet for the Nintendo Switch 2, at this point I wouldn't be surprised, and I've kind of just accepted that's going to be the reality we get to. Whether it's next year or in 10 years from now, I don't know. I'm not happy about it, but it feels like it's inevitable. So outside of the whole requiring an update for the Switch 1 games, I guess, there are some, let's call it funny, takeaways from all of these leaks. First off, they took pictures of the box, opened it up, showed the Switch 2, turned it on. Did anybody watch those videos? Yeah? Did you see anything surprising? No? Did it look exactly like your Switch 1? Yeah? There was nothing new. The box looks the same as the Switch 1. The Switch 2 looks the same as the Switch 1. The Joy-Cons look the same as the Joy-Con 1s. Powering on the console showed the same Nintendo logo. The only difference was that there was a brief shot of a 2 next to the Switch logo. Choosing the language settings, everything, it's just the Switch 1 again. Like, there's nothing new, there's nothing hidden. There is nothing groundbreaking that we saw in these videos. Like, it's not like you powered on the Switch and then Mario and Peach were sitting there waving at you, smiling, saying, "Welcome to the new Nintendo console." Like, nothing happened. It's just a launch screen that looks exactly the same as the one that we have had for 7 years. And obviously, I am stressing this not because I am upset that they didn't change anything for the Switch 1 to the Switch 2. That's a whole different discussion. It's because Nintendo thinks that is worthy of copyright strikes. Are these even technically considered copyright strikes at this point? Or are they just Nintendo has the right to remove whatever they want from anything that anybody posts? Because I don't see the infringement here. They are literally working with an anti-piracy company to take down all of these images and all of these videos of the console releasing early. This is why it's kind of important to distinguish piracy and theft and copyright infringement. Because the implication here is that the person who's posting a video of the Nintendo Switch 2 that they received early, which they probably bought it from a retailer that sold it to them early, is a pirate, I guess? And for the average person, they think that piracy is theft. So now, do you think that the person who bought the Switch 2 early is a thief? Because I know for some people, they say piracy is clearly theft. Is this theft? This isn't even piracy, but they're getting struck as if it's piracy. You know, at a certain point, you gotta start to wonder what it is Nintendo is trying to hide. They just really like to be in control of the narrative, of everything. And it's just like, calm down, dude. These are games. They're video games. They're toys. Like, yeah, don't get me wrong. Super Mario Bros. Is fun. Legend of Zelda is awesome. But let's just calm down for a second. You don't need to be in control of every single thing just because somebody decided to buy your product. Now, a few days ago, I mentioned that they had the Today app. and that they were trying to stop people from screenshotting and screen recording different gameplay footage that they shared on that app. I probably should have spoken more about it, but it's obvious that they want people to download their app for the sake of collecting data. That's why they have like 3 different apps now: Parental Control, the Nintendo Switch Online, Nintendo Today. I think there's also a Nintendo Music one. There might be more than 3 actually, now that I think about it. These are all just different ways to collect people's data, and then they can sell your data and whatever else every other company does when they force you to download an app. But the other thing is, I think part of the reason why Nintendo wants people to move towards downloading their app so that their app becomes where they get their news and where they get all of the various gameplay footage. And you know, I humorously predicted that maybe in the future they'll lock the Nintendo Directs behind a paywall on this app. I said that was a reach and it's not realistically going to happen, obviously. But in my mind, I'm like, they could potentially be like, yeah, we're doing this Direct on YouTube, and then maybe the follow-up Treehouse event, for example, is exclusive to the app. So I noticed a lot of comments, not necessarily on my video, but also throughout just the greater internet, where people were talking about this whole situation with the app. And so the people that were anti-customer rights, basically the pro-Nintendo people, were saying that, of course, Nintendo wants to shift all of their news and keep it towards their app because the internet is full of toxicity, so naturally, they're not going to want to have their videos going online so that people can criticize them. And they are absolutely right. Nintendo doesn't want criticism. Now, somebody that doesn't care about customer rights assumes that people that are fighting for the customer rights is toxic, right? It's just they're calling it toxicity, they're calling it negativity. I'm calling it people fairly criticizing products that are probably overpriced. But no matter how you spin it, Nintendo wants to control the narrative. They don't want you posting videos of the Switch 2 unboxing and turning on, because then what happens when somebody looks at it and is like, this looks exactly like my Nintendo Switch 1. What's the point? Why am I buying this? And likewise, if all of the media they're sharing to the fans, to the people that want to see how an upcoming game is looking, is siphoned through the app, they can't get any toxicity. And I'm saying toxicity with quotations. It's just a fair criticism that people might not like the product that they're showing off. And Nintendo doesn't like that. They don't like when people say, this product doesn't look good, why are you charging X amount of dollars for it? Because then that ends up going through the internet and more people start to realize we're probably getting ripped off, and that's the last thing Nintendo wants. And I think we see eye to eye here. And by we, I mean the people that are pro-customers as well as the others that are anti-customers. We agree, Nintendo doesn't want hating on their product. You know, the only thing that we disagree on is that I don't think that Nintendo is devoid of criticism. But we agree that Nintendo does not want people to speak about their product in a negative manner. So they're trying to control the narrative as best as they could to make sure they don't speak in a negative manner. And they're going to continue to overcorrect. Genki leaked the Switch 2 model back in January before they did the Switch 2 reveal. And now all of the press is going to suffer and not be able to get their hands on an early model of a Switch 2 because Nintendo doesn't want people to leak stuff. And they can only act this way because they're doing well. They can only act this way because they think that everybody will buy their product anyway. So they're basically, in their minds, they're like, we're so big, the Switch 2 is gonna do so well that everybody has to play by our rules in every way, shape, and form. Whether you're a customer, whether you're a reviewer, or whether you're a developer. It's gotta be by Nintendo's rules if you want to partake in this Nintendo adventure. And apparently, part of playing by Nintendo's rules is that you can't share Nintendo's product with the world outside of a controlled environment. Or at least not until millions of people already get the product in their hands because of pre-orders. They don't want to lose any sales. Think about it. Nintendo had a Treehouse Live event right after their Nintendo Direct. The one thing that everybody remembers from said Treehouse is that people were spamming drop the price. So now in Nintendo's mind, why would they give people another route where they can sit there and openly criticize them for setting prices for their games at $80? They can't control YouTube. They can control their app, though. And it seems more and more likely that that's the route they're going towards, at least for the Switch 2 launch. And I don't know if they're just so confident in their product, or so confident in the people that are loyal to Nintendo that are gonna buy the Switch 2, or are they just trying to censor everybody? They're just trying to silence anybody that has anything bad to say about the Nintendo Switch 2, in hopes that this doesn't affect their perfect fairy tale launch that they were dreaming of. And that might sound like a reach, but they're not sending out review units to outlets. Which again, that's something that I said I was okay with. I think review outlets are kind of crappy. They have inevitable biases. They're getting free early copies so that they can play nice and get more free early copies. But as far as Nintendo is concerned, they should want that. They want these people to come in there and say it's a good console. The issue is, if, it hits June 2nd and all these people have their consoles in their hand and the games in their hand and they're creating reviews to post online because embargoes are lifted, there might be a reviewer that talks about hiccups in performance during specific games, whether they are third-party games or first-party titles. There might be somebody that talks about how slow something is. There might be somebody that speaks about how long it took to launch something. There might be somebody complaining about the size of a file, frame drops, a lack of customization of the home menu. Or somebody might just come out and be like, yeah, this is the exact same thing as the Switch 1, but it's a little bit quicker. So either they're trying to keep everything seem so exclusive and mysterious so that you have to buy in to be part of the cool club and get the Switch 2. Like they're so confident in their product, as if they are Apple releasing a phone that's the exact same as the previous one, but there's a little bit more curvature over here, so it's just a little bit better. Or they're worried. They don't want the negative criticism anymore. They don't want people to go online after playing Cyberpunk and say that, hey, this is actually not as good as you think it is on the Switch 2. They don't want people playing Mario Kart World and they're like, the world is big, but as soon as you finish this part up, this is kind of pointless. It's wasted space. And these aren't even necessarily my ideas, but somebody out there will think so. Somebody out there will criticize the console. They'll criticize the games. They'll say that they don't like X, Y, or Z. They'll say it was so slow to get a game to download on the game key card, for example, or how they had errors transferring files over from their Switch 1 to the Switch 2, and that caused all these different hiccups and issues. Genuinely, I think Nintendo just wants to control the narrative in every way that they can. And these leaks are no different. They're not even leaks, like somebody bought a console and posted a picture of a controller. Like, what's so exclusive about seeing the way that the launch screen looks on the Nintendo Switch 2? 6 or 7 days prior to the launch of the console? It's child's play. That's all it is. It's a slap on the wrist because mommy and daddy told you not to look this way and you almost walked across the street. So Nintendo is trying to protect their babies or something. I don't exactly understand their logic here. Honestly, I don't know what the deal is exactly with Nintendo and this whole Switch 2 situation. I've been saying this for a few weeks now, but I'm pretty sure this thing is not doing as well as they expect it to do. I keep getting cold, thick-headed, and dim-witted for saying so. I'm legit considering making a video sometimes in the next few days going through how many units every single console prior to this sold at launch and how much more they sold after their price drop. I feel like I was flirting with the idea before, but I never actually did that same video. Just some kind of tangible proof for people that a launch is a very terrible metric to measure a console's success by. And again, we don't even know if the Switch 2 is going to have a record-breaking launch, but people are already saying it is a record-breaking launch. But I guess it depends on how you define launch. Is it pre-orders, or is it the first 3 months, or is it the first 6 months? In today's day and age, the pre-order would be higher because nobody leaves the house anymore to go to the store. So are people assuming that on day one they're going to get the best sales, and which means the first 3 to 6 months they're going to get great sales? I don't know. Whatever the case may be, I have been a Nintendo fan through my entire life, and I've been through so many different launches. And I can tell you with certainty, with confidence, that it was very clear the DS was going to be amazing. And it was very clear the Wii was going to be amazing. And by amazing, I mean they were going to sell very well. And it was very clear from that first trailer where we saw the Nintendo Switch click onto the side of the console and lift it up and everything. And that same ad was shown during the Super Bowl in 2017. The aura, the hype, the vibe around Nintendo, around the greater gaming community was that this console was probably going to do very well. There were some detractors because of the idea that Nintendo was just coming off the Wii U and everybody was making the same typical claims of like, oh yeah, they should just go third party because they suck. But no, there was a clear feeling. If you were a Nintendo fan, you knew this. The Switch was coming out, you knew it was going to do well the same way the DS did well and the same way that the Wii did well. But the feelings that I'm getting right now towards the Switch 2, my inner Nintendo fan gut is telling me this is just not one of those situations. And it's been something that's been creeping up on me since late last year and concerned me a bit back in early January while they were showing that the Switch 2 was just going to be the Switch 2, like nothing special, it's just more Switch. And then it got cemented right after Direct when all the prices came out. Actually, I have this thread on my phone from a gaming group chat that I said back on January 16th at 8:48 a.m. because I think this is when I first felt my concerns starting to surface. Mind you, this is back in January. This is when I had just got off making the Mario 64 retrospectives. I had released all of my classic Mario Brothers and classic Donkey Kong retrospectives in January, and I was working towards making my Super Mario Sunshine retrospectives that were launching in February, followed by Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, followed by Super Mario Galaxy. So these were all feelings I had while making my Mario videos that everybody loved before I became a dark side Nintendo fan, or whatever people are calling me, before I became Warlow. So this is a pretty lengthy group chat, so I'm just going to share some highlights. It was interesting to me that they were going with the numerical 2 route, and they didn't try anything fancy. Basically, they're selling out on their principles of innovation and just carrying on with the Switch momentum. I said it was understandable, but it is kind of sad because Satoru Iwata has been dead for 10 years, and they announce a launch of a console that goes against his principles. One of my friends, who's not even really that much of a gamer anymore, he just doesn't have the time for it, he told me this feels like the Tears of the Kingdom of Breath of the Wild, where it just felt like it was more of the same game, which for him was stale. But he understood why Nintendo was doing it because people were paying for it and succeeding. So I agreed. I said I knew this was coming. The Wii U damn near killed them because they decided to call it the Wii U and not the Wii 2. And I said that, I wasn't hoping for much. I was just really looking for maybe the ability to play simultaneously handheld and docked, basically the same way that the Wii U was, but this time do it properly. It was just me kind of being like, this is something minimum that they could do in my mind, at least. I don't really know what the tech limitations are. And then we all kind of agreed that the Switch was having a healthy life, so it makes sense that they would just keep going with it. And people don't really need innovation. And then we just kind of remembered various things, like the light gun with the NES, the joystick with the Nintendo 64, the Rumble. Then we talked about how even in the early days when Nintendo was going for power, that power was innovation. And then one of my friends who's a major Sony fanboy started laughing, saying that Nintendo shows their much anticipated next console and all they show is the buttons and freaking Mario Kart. What a sad trailer for the fans of Nintendo. And then he says something interesting. I'm still gonna get it, so I can play Tears of the Kingdom with more than 20 frames per second. So then I told them this is why I was kind of upset, because they've become part of the generic crowd. And if rumors are to be believed, and they end up being a 4K console, and their selling point is that it's a 4K Switch, that's going to be so disappointing. And then funnily enough, after that, somebody shared a screenshot that said that it was rumored to cost $400, and we were all saying that was probably too expensive for a Nintendo console. But I mean, again, this is before we knew all of the specs and everything. Nothing was really leaked yet. In any case, I just thought it was kind of fun to scroll through that because at that time, I was still very much hyped for the console. I was just like, fine, it's just going to be a Switch 1 again, but a little bit stronger. But even then, for the next 3 months, while releasing all of my Mario retrospectives that all of my subscribers were very much enjoying daily, in the back of my mind, I was like, okay with the Switch 2. And it wasn't until after the Direct where they put up all the prices where I was like, that's for me, that's the bottom line. Like, I was kind of like, I will take this, I will buy it, I'll be happy about it. It's not a big deal. They're still going to make great games. But when they come out with all of their prices and they're trying to raise things up to $80 and they're trying to force game key cards on third-party publishers and they're trying to force you to upgrade your terms of service so they can brick your console and they're trying to get you to stop game sharing even though you've been able to do it for the past 3 years. Oh, speaking of game sharing, by the way, it turns out it's even more limited than a previous video that I had made. I actually wanted to do a whole video on this, so I don't know if I will or not, but just in case. I was under the impression that for Jamboree, if you had one copy of the game and you had 4 people around you, you could just stream the entire game and play it all together. And at the time, I thought that was like very underwhelming. That was not good game sharing. I guess like unless everybody has a Switch Lite in your household or something, then it could be beneficial. But aside from that, they weren't even allowing this online and it was only to be done locally with Mario Party Jamboree specifically. And it turns out it's even worse than that. Straight from the Mario Party Jamboree Nintendo Switch 2 page, the only thing you can play is a single board and 30 minigames with default party rules. So this ridiculously limited feature that they took away from the first Switch made it drastically worse for the Switch 2 is even worse than I thought it was going to be. And I wanted to make a video about this, but I had already made about 4 videos about how terrible the new game sharing thing is and how they screwed us out of having better game sharing before, and everybody just seems to ignore it and be like, hey, it was not a feature, it was just a workaround. But no, they're not even just making the Switch 1 again. They're making the Switch 1 but worse going into this generation, and that's hopefully not going to work for them. But yeah, this video was way longer than I wanted it to get. I talked about more things than I expected I would talk about, but we're getting closer to launch, and we are limited on the amount of days where I can remind people how crappy this Nintendo Switch 2 situation is. Once launch happens, we can watch the videos of people online making reviews about it and talking about how underwhelming it is. Since I am not buying one, I will not be able to do that. I'll still be posting. I'll be posting stuff here, and I'll be posting stuff on my Nintendine Plus channel where I actually talk about games instead of just whining about Nintendo all the time. So there'll still be plenty of content, but I imagine there's going to be a little bit of a shift in how I do things starting from next week onwards. In any case, I'm sure I'll be back to talk about something else absurd that Nintendo does over the next few days soon. Thanks again for listening, and I will catch you guys on the next one.